Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation podcast. Danny and Christian are here, and we are here to discuss the hellacious tornadoes that plagued Kentucky. And what was the other state, too?
I think it was Kansas. I'm not sure though.
Kansas.
Yes, Kansas City. Yep.
All right. So, Danny, we've been seeing a lot of natural disasters lately, especially this year. So tell me, are the end of times coming?
Well, that's a little doom and gloom, but you know, this instance was four tornadoes, at least from my knowledge, right? And there's definitely a lot more weather events in our lifetimes. I mean, I'm 24 years old and I've seen plenty of crazy weather events, but there's always been hurricanes and just the like. However, one thing we do have to start realizing now is that climate change is having not a direct effect on these events, but an acceleration effect. So what do I mean by that? So let me just go take a little look-see at some statistics here. So I'll put this up on the screen now. Oh, you disabled the screen sharing. If you could just grab that.
1 second. There you go.
So I'll put it up on my screen too. So you can see here, this is just one instance. So if we look from the 1900s to the 10s and 20s, we're looking at the overall trend here. And this is the relative number of extreme events. You can see from this period onwards, we've been trending up, right? Now, this looks scary, but it's probably not an actual prediction of what will happen future. Like it could even like go down, right? But what this is trying to tell you is that the overall trend is going up for extreme weather events. Now, the reason why this is happening is because from the 1900s to, or not the 1900s, basically the 20th century to the 1950s was a complete super industrious period in, human history. So between then and now, we've done a lot to our environment, especially like the fact that we didn't really understand how to efficiently use gasoline and such. So from that time till I think it was the 60s, the 70s, where we started using really efficient ways to make, gas just because we were running out of fuel, which is hilarious. We basically tried, or we were basically doing a good thing in that we were using less gasoline overall. But how this affects our environment is lagged. So it's basically a lagging indicator. So now we are now experiencing the bad stuff from our past actions, which is just more weather events or more extreme weather events. Now you'll see in other areas, that are plagued by droughts, for example, that they are going into, extreme phases of their localized environments. So let's take California, for instance. So California didn't always used to be on fire like it is today. I've been there, I think a year or two ago, and pretty much all the northern California is just burnt. Like you'll drive by just crispy trees, all blackened. You'll go to the redwood forest, there'll be, burned down trees and stuff. You'd be like, wow, I don't see this in New Jersey. Well, that's because the localized environment in California is dry, right? And it was prone to a lot of droughts to begin with. Now, when you see this happen, it accelerated the process of this environment to become a desert, because this is how environments work, right? They have cycles, and especially localized climates. So California is on track to become a desert, and it was always going to be on track to become a desert. That's just how the world works, or at least how localized climate works. Same reason why there's the Sahara Desert in Africa. That used to be a green, luscious place. It's just how localized environments change. However, we have accelerated this process. Now, this is 20 years after. I was going to bring up the point. Anthony came on today, that this is pretty much like, if you try to deny this, what I'm describing here, the increase in activity, you're basically trying to deny gravity, because in 2001, the scientific community came up basically 99%, consensus on this. So, it's not more over, does this exist? It's how bad is it going to get in certain areas? So I work for a company, and we do a lot of risk assessment. So one of the things that we do is physical risk. Physical risk is anything that involves, hurricanes, tornadoes, and such. So you have to make sure that you're tracking, what could happen and the percent that could happen, and then how do you prevent these things from, affecting your business. So let's just go take a little look-see again over at some, where extreme weather events are in America. Okay, so you'll see here, it was basically more over, the West Coast is where a lot of these things happen. Okay, and then over here. Now, the reason why that is because that area on the West Coast is much drier. So it's more prone to, tornadoes and such to begin with. And because we've accelerated, this process of change through extreme weather, which is how these climates change to begin with, we are now accelerating them to change into another climate. So, Nevada's already desert. So the only thing that's going to happen there is constant tornadoes and such, or, or extreme heat, right? And now just literally just burn it until it becomes, desert, or something grows eventually. But you'll see a lot of businesses, they don't really go on the West Coast unless it's in California. And that's specifically because there's a ton of tech there. So it's good to be close to those guys. But you don't see a lot of businesses. You see like Tesla, for example, going to Texas, maybe. But your general business won't go down to the south. They're more over on the East Coast almost entirely. Now, the reason why that is because you have less risk for a physical event to go and destroy your factory, because you need to go and make sure it's going to cost you money, basically, to go and make preventive measures. So it's basically a cost risk analysis in this way. So you could be like, say, if I'm working for Walmart and I have a ton of locations in Texas, how am I going to prevent that Walmart from blowing off, the map from a tornado or something, right? Or, in Arizona, they're specifically dealing with high heat. How do we let people live in a city where it's 110 degrees and it's only going to get hotter from here on out? Well, we have ways to prevent this. In Arizona specifically, you'll see that they are growing more trees, and there's a lot more plants and such, especially in high income neighborhoods, and that will lower the temperature around it. And that's because, when there's a bunch of trees there, right, it almost absorbs the heat from that area, because they literally take up carbon. Like, imagine, how we breathe air, right? We exhale carbon dioxide. Trees do the exact opposite, right? And they're breathing out oxygen, and then how they produce that is through sun. So they absorb a lot of the sun that's going on there. And you'll see when you look and people do the heat testers, you'll see low income neighborhoods don't have a lot of trees, don't have a lot of grass at all. It's all like burnt out grass, and they're registering the highest. And you're going to have to find some way to mitigate this risk. And then, so the big thing, though, in America specifically, is that there is a huge force going against science in this case. Now, why would you think that? I just mentioned, like, I'm doing little tracking for a business that's worried about this. I'm sure they don't want to deal with this. Why do you think that's happening in America?
I don't know, Danny. It's more like one side says one thing and then the other side just goes with the opposite. So if in this case you see the left talk about climate change a lot, therefore the right is like, it's conspiracy. It's to put money in their pockets. green technology, all that stuff. Um, I remember, I can't remember who it was, but I had a family friend say that there was a certain someone, um, more like a politician or figure from the early 2000s who, if things did turn to more like sustainable energy models, he would have made it an incredible profit. Um, for the sake of this, I can't think of who that person was, but um, it's interesting because a lot of people were like, "Oh, if someone has something to gain here, it's probably a conspiracy." That's what that's kind of the conclusion that a lot of these people come. And I mean, I went to when I when I first started following politics. I didn't really, everyone was gung ho about the environment. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Um, but then now, like my tune has changed a little bit, and I kind of care more. I'd like to see different things happen. Um, so I guess what question that I would like to ask you is: Is there a way to kind of reverse the clock and put the Earth back on track for healing rather than kind of just delaying the inevitable?
First, yes, I'll say that right off the bat, but I just want to just circle back to just that point where we're talking about, how the right grifts in that
Mhm.
way, where they're trying to just basically go against left. Well, in this case specifically, I want to say so, and that's because there are industries in America that benefit from fossil fuels,
Yeah.
coal industry, gas industry, oil, even natural gas. So these industries don't want to see any regulation going on because the ultimate, what would happen if we were to go and try to reverse these things, like you said? Well, first off, energy could not be profit driven anymore. And why do I say that? Well, gas right now is cheap. Okay. Why would I go and, invest in a ton of electric cars when electricity is also expensive like gas? So my investment is kind of just not doing anything. Like, it's not making me money. I'm just basically throwing money to go into a trash can and burn. So it's really in that way, it's not sustainable from a business end point of expect or perspective. Not even that. But say if we did go sustainable, right? Well, we couldn't use really gas anymore. We could probably use it to, mow our lawns maybe, but we would have to do an extraordinary shift in how we, use energy and what energy sources we use. So, companies would just die. Like, there would be a lot of, gas companies out there, and especially the ones that are making pipelines and such, or drilling companies, that would just die off because they wouldn't have any more demand anymore. So they are defending their industry through politicians, buying them out, through lobbying. So, and that's where, when it comes to nepotism, almost like when it comes to politics. I'll give you a great example. Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat, he owns part of a coal mining industry. I forget the name of the company, but do you think that guy is going to care about the environment? No. Why? Well, because if he did, he would probably be bankrupting himself. So that's the problem, right? We have people that make decisions for us that have, a conflict of interest, and there's plenty of them. And it's pretty much like 80% to 90% of politicians that have a conflict of interest somewhere around the line. It could be the guy owning a coal, plant, to, guy, a buddy with Saudi Arabia because they have pics of his, him peeing on someone or something. I don't know. But I'm sure there's something out there like that in Saudi Arabia, especially just because how many defensive weapons we give them. But there is a pathway to go and do this, but it's extremely hard for a country like America to do it because we are capitalists, right? So you would be saying to yourself, okay, this one industry is no longer going to be used to seek capital, energy, the production of energy will be no, unless like you were to be like, okay, let's switch to nuclear energy. Everybody's producing nuclear energy. There you go. Free market, you can do capitalism in that aspect. But there's not a whole bunch of companies doing nuclear, fission or fusion, right? It's just like it's unrealistic. So you're going to have to kill industries, and you're at right now you would have to go take the profit incentive off of any kind of like gas or any kind of just anything like that, because there's nothing's going to change when money's involved in America. It's just straight up. I mean, it's just the way it is here, and we have to recognize that. So guess you could by 2050 would have to basically go net zero, or else we're done. And there's a lot of implications of what will happen eventually, and that's only 30 years from now. It's not too long of a time. So, and I don't think we're going to get there realistically. And you'll see, and like I said, it's a lagging indicator. For these 30 years, whatever we do is going to affect us down the line in a bad way. So let me give you an example of a very extreme case that will happen in places that have high humidity. For example, Florida's hot, has a lot of humidity. Sometimes that humidity goes over 90%. Do you know what happens when the temperature is over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and the humidity is 90%? Your body can't produce sweat. What happens when your body can't produce sweat? You die from a heat stroke. So, wow, I've never heard of this happening before. I never seen this happen before, right? Well, that's because it's a relatively new thing. We don't really have that many environments. Rainforest, for example, you're not going to see that happening in the rainforest. Why? Because it rains all the time.
Mhm.
And that's the climate reacting and making sure that, it's in balance, right? So animals can live there. But when we have accelerated, the process of climate change, right? That happens naturally. When we have accelerated that, some environments can't go and account for that, right? Like they used to. So what will happen is literally mass extinction events that will happen in certain areas. Florida is going to be one of those areas just because how hot and humid it is. It's going to be those combinations, right? Where it's hot and humid. And you'll see that around the globe. I imagine in Mexico, or not Mexico, in South America, there'll be places like that. There'll also be rising sea levels. So New York, New Jersey, parts of it will be underwater. That's a bad thing. Now, one thing I want to say is businesses know this, and they don't really care too much. And that's why you'll see almost every single business leases their buildings. Why?
Mm.
Because they understand that climate risk is so bad that why the hell would I go buy a building in New York when it's the investment's not going to make sense in 50 years, right? Because guess what? It's going to be underwater. You know what I mean? And I know this sounds ridiculous what I'm saying, right? But these are literally what we have projected out to happen. And it's always, and these are projections. It's always been worse than projections. Like literally every decade, we predicted it. So you could say I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm thinking everything's going to go underwater and we're about to live in Atlantis, but we have at some point you have to take a sober view of what's happening, and we are going to see from the 2020s to 2030s, you're going to see the effects. And I believe you will see a little downtick from 2040s, from that 10-year span. That's because we have reduced from the 80s to the 90s, that area, or you can even say 80s to 2000s. We have reduced the amount of pollution that we put into the environment. But the big thing then was what we would call short-term emissions. So that is like things like spray we put on plants.
Mhm.
I don't really have any specific examples of names, but I know that that's one short-term emission. but basically it's basically stuff that goes in and doesn't have a very like long lifespan. However, will increase the heat index very short time frame, and then it'll disperse, and then you'll be fine. So why does this affect environments worse than, let's say, carbon dioxide? Well, if you change an environment extremely fast, like it's not used to being changed, because climate's changed by CO2 since its inception, since the Earth started, just because that's how it works. Trees, us, things that live, oxygen, carbon dioxide. It can pretty much usually account for it, except when it's like accelerated using cars and such. But even then, the climates are strong. However, when you have a substance that blocks, especially in a localized area, you know, it kind of traps in that heat and it heats it up fast. That's when you're going to start having weird events going on, like 4 tornadoes, for example. So, like places like like Kansas, or was it Kentucky? Was the
Yeah.
other one that you said?
Hmm.
Those places are seeing the results of what happened 40, 50 years past, and they're now having to deal with it. So, that's the sad part. But, I can't go back in time and warn them against them, because they think I'm an idiot and tell me I'm stupid. You know what I mean? And they wouldn't even probably care if they did were convinced, because too much money in it.
There is
So,
also there's generation to generation, you always see kind of a shifting of responsibility. So like maybe this past generation didn't want to deal with it, so they're just going to their kids deal with it, and then inevitably that's kind of just what happened. And now it's us, where I think that probably we're the most gung-ho on rectifying it, but will it be enough? That's to remain to be seen. um do you isn't it true that if, like, say that humans just completely just disappeared from Earth, the Earth would kind of repair itself in a way?
yes. I mean, like, say if we don't do anything,
Uh,
2050, there'll be mass starvations, there'll be water shortages, there'll be mass migrations. A lot of humans are going to be wiped off the Earth. We'll always survive here just because we're smart as hell and we're stubborn as fuck. Might even go to Mars. But, the less humans here on Earth, the better it is for the planet. And it really depends on what we do too, because like our existence is not the thing that's causing this. Is just exactly what we do. We have been causing climate change, or we have been accelerating climate change rather, since like the 1700s, since we started burning logs to create pith, to create oil to put it on lanterns, right?
mhm.
That we have done stuff to the environment, and it's just a fact of our life. Now we're getting smarter though. We know how to use energy in different ways that doesn't go and fuck up the environment. We do a lot of stupid things though, that Bitcoin, for example, is pretty much kind of fucks up the environment, just because the amount of CO2 that's released from that process.
Mhm.
But
Speaking of CO2, I'm not sure if you know this, but it's a funny fact. No matter, when Genghis Khan was at large, he helped scrub about 700 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere from everybody that he killed, that his forces were responsible of killing.
wow,
Um,
that's that's funny. It's like a very weird metric. I guess
yeah,
that makes sense. But trees scrub it.
yeah,
Why didn't Genghis Khan just run around with a bunch of trees and just had people breathe into them or something? I don't know.
because conquest, baby.
Conquest, baby.
um, so one of the biggest obstacles that face this climate issue is that even if we get on board, does that mean other nations will get on board too?
We're yes and no. So some nations are not ready for it yet. Um, Let me think of India. That's a good
Mhm.
example. India is a developing first world country. That sounds a very weird statement, but They need to go through an industrial period still.
Yeah.
To like China already did theirs, and
Mhm.
we've seen what happens and what that looks like. Not very pretty for the citizens, hard to breathe there. But America has gone through that too, just earlier. So civilizations are still going to go and do those things, but you have to realize that there are bigger polluters out there than India, and India will become one. But hopefully that we'll be able to, provide them with technology like we have in for like, 5G, for example. Google's going over to India and providing them with that. Hopefully we can help them their energy and make it more efficient in that way. But it's going to be up to the innovators to go and help out other countries, and even you can make capital from it too. You can help them establish those things. But you're going to have countries that are more developing do that. I mean, China is now lessening the amount they produce, at least somewhat so. We have done a very good job as Americans, but there's a lot of things that are just a global force of that is going to take us just saying, okay, we can't do this shit anymore. For example, private jets, so, or any jet, any airplane out there. So the fuel that goes into that causes a lot of emissions, which
Mhm.
is very ironic because how the hell do you get to, what's the summit you do the climate stuff for? Is it G20? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But those summits, tons and tons and tons of people fly in
Yeah.
with their jets and planes, basically also destroying the environment just to go talk about, the environment, how we're going to save it. We're going to go throw a coin into the pond like they did literally this year. Or they're going to, talk about how are they going to do with all the migrants that are to come here, climate migrants. Yeah, let's go talk about that and not the actual real issues and like technologies that we need to do. So they're not really like looking for too many solutions on the global scale. And that's the problem, right? Is that humans aren't very like super smart when it comes to forward thinking.
Mhm.
Like we're better at short-term thinking than anything. And that's why when we talk about the climate thing, they're talking about climate migrants, because guess what? That's happening now. There's people coming from all over the place, to go into first world countries on, asylum because they can't live anymore in these areas or they'll just die. So it's always short term, and there will be people that are innovators, and as we are constantly innovating in the internet scene, that's the only force going and counteracting what we've done in the past. So by 2050 we need to have some shit actually stable, or like something we need to do something by 2050, or we're going to set ourselves down a path that we pretty much are going to be fucked for. And there are going to be many, many, many nations that are not, rich like America or rich like China that are going to suffer a ton from this, because there's going to be water shortages. There's going to be food shortages. People don't understand, like, there's a lot, it's very interconnected climate. So if it heats up, guess what? Tons of bugs. They're going to eat all your crops. Could
Mhm.
be 60, 70, but guess what? The hotter it gets, more bugs are going to eat your crop. Hotter it gets, the more droughts that are going to happen. The more lack of water there is going to be. More climates are going to turn into desert climates, right? So they're just going to, you're not even going to be able to live there anymore. So you're going to have people move out. So it doesn't just affect, the heat index. It's not just going to get hotter. It's going to affect so many avenues of life. And, it's going to kill off a lot of animals too, especially in the water, because there's certain animals within, like, especially in like water ecosystems that can't survive like over like certain temperature. They'll just die.
Mhm.
So, and that's what's happening, right now with coral reefs. Well, it's not just that, but it also, like coral reefs can die from, you going in the water with suntan lotion on and swimming around in it in Hawaii. But the most reason why they are dying is because they're being bleached by the sun. So there's a lot of things on Earth that can't withstand these things, but it's happened before, right? This heat has happened before, but it's happened on a slower scale, more methodically, right? And that's just how Earth. They call it global wobbling. the concept, just because, you know, the magnetic axis kind of just like wobbles the earth, and like it kind of causes like extreme like heat event, like heat eras, right? And then like extreme cold eras. That's why we talk about the ice age and such, right? And you know, of course that's going to happen, but what we need to do is prevent short-term events, because all that's going to do, these short-term events are going to accelerate us to one of the extremes. And guess what? We're not going to be able to live here anymore. We can maybe live underground like mole people, and then go blind like the farmer from Skyrim and just start bobbing around, you know, picking axes and like harvesting bug meat all day long. And that's gonna be great. But you know, I don't want that. And I'm sure that our generation will help to prevent this. But you know, climate's not the only thing the last generation has fucked with us with. You know,
Yes.
economics is a big
Yeah,
one too. America,
I knew that you were gonna say that one. We discussed that a lot.
yeah.
That's definitely a very evident one that they continue to keep pushing off. But listen, this is an interesting situation, and well, we send prayers to the people that were affected by these tornadoes and all these other different crazy, wacky weather events that have been happening this year. We'll be sure to update you on any of them as they come along and the political implications of them. As that what this is what this show is supposed to accomplish. So we always put a political spin on things. But that's everything from us, from everything at moderation for this week. And it's almost Christmas, so we have some fun episodes coming up. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Danny, for coming.
No problem.
And that's all. Have a good one, everybody.